Thank you to the Outman Foundation and the Horace W. Goldsmith Foundation for helping make the PROJcast possible.
Welcome to our show. Join our flow. It's the 52nd Street PROJcast.
From the heart of Hell's Kitchen, this is the PROJcast, a podcast created by the community at the 52nd Street Project. We are a nonprofit in New York City that partners the young people of Hell's Kitchen with professional artists to create original work, often performed free of charge for the general public. I'm Jarrett Kim, program director here at the project. Since quarantine began back in March, project staff have adapted 8 programs for a virtual format, including online versions of playmaking, playback, teen ensembles, songmaking, wordplay, art making, radio making, and storytelling. And we've introduced new workshops like cooking, movement, and puppetry. We've had 4 virtual playmaking performances and several other closed sharings of work created by project members. This episode is part of a mini-series highlighting the stories from the virtual radiomaking program created this past spring. 4 of our then high school seniors, now college freshmen, did everything remotely and virtually, including the interviews you'll hear, with support, as always, from some awesome project volunteers. Cults are a popular subject of documentaries, TV shows, and podcasts. Back in April, Karen wanted a deeper understanding, not about cults themselves, but about the individuals who, knowingly or unknowingly, become part of cults. And how does someone who has left a cult begin to heal from that traumatic experience? Karen sat down with actor and project volunteer Ariel Estrada for a first-hand account of his experience with a cult, and how theater has helped him heal. Here's Karen's piece.
When I was 20 years old, I started training in this Indonesian martial art called Pukulan, and it ended up being I had all the hallmarks of a cult at the time. But of course, I was too young really to know about it, or to really sort of understand what kind of organization it was. And there were a lot of other factors too about being involved in it. I didn't come from privilege. I was lower middle class family. I went to school on scholarships and lots of student loans and working my butt off at 80-hour-a-week jobs to work my way through college, right? On top of a full course load. I double majored in theater and music, right? On top, and doing Pukulan at the time, right? Just training all the time. And I was very afraid. I was in a situation where I didn't really have anybody supporting me. I was also not out of the closet at that point. And at that point, it was dangerous to come out. You could not get a job. You could not get healthcare. All these terrible things could happen to you still if you came out as gay. Now, I don't know how much you've studied about or how much you know about what gay culture was like, or the culture was like for gay men at the height of the AIDS crisis, and even at both the beginning and the height of the AIDS crisis. I started coming of age when AZT was just starting to come out, and that that drugs to make AIDS a manageable disease, at least for a certain sector of the population with privilege, right? That was still coming out, and at that point, AZT was just as bad as the disease. It was killing as many people as it was helping, right? When I entered the martial arts school for the very first time when I was 20, I saw a picture of one of their black belts and a candle in front of it, and my gaydar immediately went off. I knew that the man was gay in that picture, and I asked the front desk receptionist, "Who is this person?" And she, of course, confirmed who this was. He was an openly gay man who was dying of AIDS, who was one of their black belts. And I was immediately hooked because I had always wanted to train martial arts. I always wanted to, and I knew on some level that I wanted to learn how to empower myself and defend myself, because I felt so disempowered. My all my thinking at that point, and I, of course, being, having the benefit of hindsight, of course, I didn't know what I was feeling, but what I'm feeling now, I knew I was feeling then, actually, was fear and lack of a place to belong. And then Pukalan gave that for a while. And then it got really weird and terrible. It was always weird and terrible, but it took as often happens in cults. You just sort of get indoctrinated slowly and you get deeper in. And of course, that's what ended up happening to me. It sure starts out with a good story, right? Or with the premise of helping people. Guru, and the name of the person, that was her title, the woman who headed the system, or headed the cult. The premise of how she was running the school was that she was openly lesbian, right? And so she made this, and that she was also, that most of the senior students in the school were women martial artists, right? And many of them were survivors of rape and domestic violence, who were using martial arts and self-defense training to empower themselves and heal from their trauma. But then in practice, it got really bad. It got really bad. I mean, not the least of which was the pyramid scheme stuff. But as I'm sure you've read in some of your research, right? Cults are often known by the control over the lives of the members of it, by the person who leads it, right? Pretty extreme financial duress that they put their members under, and weird repetitions of the psychological traumas that these people had already been through, right? Rather than empowering these people, it was just it ended up for many people, in fact, I would say all, a repetition of the things that they had gone through that brought them to the cult in the first place. Right, but it just had a nicer face. That's what's so seductive about cults. It gives you very easy answers to very complex problems, right? That demand complex answers, but instead they give you something easy that gives you something to have faith in, and that are easier to believe in and understand. And also, it's perfect for people who blame themselves, who have low self-esteem, because of course they're going to say to themselves, oh, it's my fault that I have alcoholism, or it's my fault I broke my leg, or it's my fault. In this way that I think is so damaging and just incredibly unhealthy and toxic. I can tell you a couple of misconceptions about what it means to be in a cult and what people think of being in cults, because again, that was sort of the impetus of me writing the show, of my own solo show, was I was asking myself, how did I get involved with this? Because I thought I was smart. I thought I was educated. I thought that I was stronger than this, right? And that doesn't preclude that I'm a relatively smart guy, and that doesn't preclude that I'm strong, right? But again, that's not what cults do. They are designed to prey on your weaknesses, and they're designed to prey on the weaknesses of even the strongest people. That's what they're for. That's why they work, right? I think one of the biggest misconceptions about people who are in cults is that they're somehow uneducated, or they're too dumb to know better. Cults prey on your own fear, and they prey on your own insecurities. And you don't have to be wealthy or poor to have insecurities or to have fear, right? At sort of my deepest point in the cult, I was on the national board of Pukalan. And I was one of the, I wouldn't say I was a decision maker, that's for sure, but I was doing a lot of work to try and spread Pukalan, right? Because I was so enamored with the thought of I was helping in spread this empowerment, right? But I will say, even at that point, I had begun to have had doubts Like I had so many doubts actually. And then again, this is fairly common among most cults, is that people who are in it will feel a lot of doubt, but they're afraid to leave. Again, a very toxic situation where people don't want to leave. It's very Stockholm syndrome, if you know that term, where people become their own jail keepers, right? And they are afraid to leave a situation that they know is bad for them, but they stay because they're too afraid of what else is going on the outside, right? And it's not lost on me that the more comfortable I became as a gay man in New York City, that the more I felt like I could leave, gather the strength to leave. I don't think I could have gathered the strength to leave unless there had been a significant amount of liberation happening for the gay community. So I'm 50 now. I stopped training seriously when I was around 40, 42, somewhere between 40 and 42, right? So I've been out of it for like 10 years now, but it's taken me this long to feel relatively comfortable about even talking about it. I don't think it's impossible to heal yourself from that trauma and take the good stuff that you learned and continue on. I knew that I couldn't. And for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is that the being in this cult for 20 years also ruined my body. I mean, or it did have a significant toll on my body. I have 2 hip replacements. My shoulders have both been reconstructed and both my knees have been reconstructed, just from the wear and tear that my body that it took. I also had, this is the sort of thing that I only notice every once in a while, right? Because you just sort of get used to it, and who knows what my brain would be like. But I had significant concussions over the years, right? And occasionally I will notice that like, oh, I don't remember things very well. I started writing the show about 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago now at this point. And it took me 8 years to even get to the point of where I said that I'm ready to even talk about it, right? Because I did a lot of suppressing of it, actually. Saying like, I'm fine, I'm absolutely fine, right? And that it was not fine. So what happens with all these, what's in common with a lot of solo actors who are telling these very deeply personal stories, when they're first developing the piece, it is traumatizing, right? You are reliving your trauma that happened to you again, and not just once, but over and over and over again, and telling it to an audience, and then realizing you are actually using the piece to hide. The audience can always tell when you're BSing, right? So, and then you can tell as a performer because it comes out of your mouth like, oh, this feels bad. Yeah, it feels like you're lying, right? And that's part of my job. I think that the hallmark of like any actor is that they like to tell the truth. It's hard for them to lie, which belies the stereotype of actors. Oh, actors are good liars. It's actually the opposite. They're good truth tellers, right? And when actors are really good, they can tell the truth of exactly who they are in the moment. This is all to say that, like, when you're developing the piece for the first time, it's just like, oh God, it takes a long time to do these solo shows because, oh my God, goodness, you are going through this trauma over and over again. And oh, it's not quite right. Come to another workshop of it. Crud. Here we go again. But I remember the very first day when I did this I did a section of it. I got a developmental residency at a organization called Barn Arts in Maine, a wonderful arts organization led by my friend Andrew Simon. I had a wonderful 8-day residency there that culminated with doing the first 20 minutes of the show. And it was mind-blowing, right? It was very, I could feel something shift in me that hadn't shifted in 8 years, right? And it was scary. It was actually also a little scary because like I'm breaking patterns. I expressed something. I basically told truth to power, which is which is the for beautiful purposes. One of the beautiful purposes of art, right? The other. Have you ever heard the saying? And I can't remember who this is attributed to, but that art is this beautiful lie that tells us that helps us find the truth, right? That's also true, right? Because it's sort of like you take art as one of these things where you're seeing. I think it's somewhere in this combination of things in there. It does tell the truth, but you're also seeing the truth through a lens, right? You place it through a particular lens that you build, or you put it through gauze, like a curtain or something that filters out just sort of specific things. And it tells you something about the situation that you didn't guess before, or even the artist didn't realize was happening. And that's sort of what I was realizing through it. After that first workshop in Maine, it was, I couldn't touch it again for 6 months. It was too painful to look at it again. And then I managed to look at it again like 6 months later for another writing residency. And then I did it again another 6 months after that. And like now I've done it like 3 months. I'm taking a look at it. The most immediate workshop that I did was just a few weeks ago. And it took me, so it took me 3 months since the last writing workshop that I did, writing residency I did. So I'm getting shorter and shorter periods of time in between because I can tell I'm getting better because I'm able to recover a little faster from writing it, right? As I'm getting closer to something that I feel like is real. So it's fun being an artist. But as I was writing the piece, and again, going back to how art heals, right? I was able to see the truth through a different angle in a way that nothing else could, that definitely therapy couldn't do even, right? Because it forced me to look at things in a different way. And not only doing it forced me to look at things in a different way, but to also express it in a different way in front of an audience so that they understood, right? And that moment that I performed it, I knew I was really onto something, partly because I knew I didn't give a crap about what the audience thought at all, right? I just knew that there was something really important to me that was happening in that moment that I'd only experienced in theater very rarely. It's been fantastic for me as an artist on that level because it also tells me when like I am BSing, right? When I'm not telling the truth, right? When I'm like, because I can feel it. Not only can I feel it when I'm saying it, like this doesn't feel real. This feels like I'm lying, right? But the audience senses it too, right? And because I've been acting for so long and doing this as a professional actor for oh my goodness, for 30 years now, right? One of the things that you begin to become in tune with as you get more experience as an actor is sort of like, oh, is the audience with me? Are they not with me? And like the audience will always be with you when you're telling the truth. And then the audience will always not be with you if they sense that you are BSing, right? And that is one of the magic things about live theater, right? And one of the things I miss most of all about the times that we're living in right now in quarantine, right, is because we don't have that wonderful connection that we get in live theater where there is an immediate exchange of energy and truth and a dialogue about that truth going back and forth, and it's happening in the moment. It will never be seen again. and even if you record it, that it still doesn't come through. Creating art is the most healing thing I've ever done, and particularly in terms of my solo show. But working on my solo show has also made me a better actor when I'm using somebody else's words when I'm telling somebody else's truth through their writing, right? Because I know what it feels like when I'm telling my own truth, right? It's something that's true in my life, right? And that what it feels like to tell somebody else's truth is not dissimilar when you're an interpretive artist, like an actor, doing a play and acting, acting somebody else's words. Yeah, but being genuine, having integrity, all those things matter so deeply. Anger is very empowering, right? And in many ways, that anger is a lot like fear, right? That same fear that drove me into a cult, right? Because what is fear except misplaced anger, right? Often you'll hear therapists say that, or psychologists say that, or self-help people will say that, but it's not inaccurate, right? And that fear is misplaced anger, and that I was angry at being treated, how I was treated as a gay man in the 90s and late 80s, excuse me. I was angry how I was being treated as a person of color, right? I was angry at the trauma that a racist trauma that my parents had to go through as immigrants here to this country, right? And those things can be a spark, but it is hard to sustain anger over time, right? I don't know if you've ever read studies about how racism is actually terrible for your health, right? They have plenty of studies. In fact, there's this pretty well-known news article on NPR that talks about how racism and that causes all these health disparities with people, right? And that it can literally kill you, right? And same thing, because it's mostly misplaced anger going into different places, right? This is a good way to call back that book that I mentioned earlier, The Body Keeps the Score, right? That my friend Andrew gave me when I was first starting the research and development phase of my solo show. In The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'll say it again just in case. Bessel van der Kolk writes about how deeply your emotional life affects your physical health, right? In which I was initially like, oh, this sounds a little quackery. It sounds a little like quackery. It sounds a little like pretty extreme self-help. But the more that I read it, including accounts of Vietnam veterans who suffered from extreme PTSD, or survivors of rape or hate crimes or domestic violence or child abuse, right? And how those affected their physical body, and how the suppression of that, again, going back to truth-telling and how art is healing, right? How art can help you tell the truth and find the truth through different ways, and saying that truth to the public and sharing it to the community and sharing it is inherently healing, right? And helps you move the energy that is stuck in you, the emotional pain that is stuck in you. That studies show it literally makes you sick, right? And you talk about divisions, right? And the us versus them mentality. We're really sick as a country right now, right? And that this is an aspect of that. This is an aspect of sort of the health of the country, that we have these great divides that are between us, right? And if there is any solution to be had, it's about like respecting truth. It's why one of the reasons that I have so much respect for journalism, right? I wish I were a better journalistic writer. I would have gone into journalism. Why I have so much respect for scientists, especially now in the times that we're living in, right? They tell the truth in ways that can't be escaped, as painful as it is, and as hard as 45 and his regime are trying to change it, right? I truly believe the truth will somehow win out, because it always does. because I think it feels too good to tell the truth. It feels too good to tell your real story, right? So when you talk about this divide, right, I truly believe that one of the ways that we can heal is to just demand the truth. And whether we're telling that truth through being a journalist, or telling that truth through being a scientist, or telling that truth through being an artist, again, there are many ways to approach it, right? And I think being an artist is what I can do, so that's what I'm going to do. And I hope that in some way it makes a difference. And I think even just from my experience of telling what happened with my story, of how good it is and feels and still does, to be able to really sort of heal from that. I sort of want everybody to feel that, as hard as it is, because it's not easy. It still isn't easy to experience it, to have to re-experience that trauma over again. But what feels good is like knowing why, and actually having something tangible ways to fix it. Because now I know why. Right? Before I was asking how did this happen? But that's not the important question. The important question is why. Because if you know why you made those kind of decisions, I can tell myself that I'm safe again. Right? And that I'm safe and I can make different decisions now. Right? I can be healed from that fear and anger. Right? And if there is any solution to be had to the divisions that we have now, is that we sort of confront our fears, we confront our anger collectively and with compassion.
That was Karen's piece. A huge thank you to volunteer Ariel Estrada for sharing your story. Karen worked with volunteer Kerry Warren during the radiomaking process, and the original music in this story was composed by Jarrett Murray. A special thanks to volunteer Therese Barbado for offering her interviewing insights to radiomaking this year. Karen is the recipient of the Henry and Gloria Jacobs Scholarship, a semi-annual scholarship which goes to a project member who demonstrates high academic merit and financial need to attend University of Michigan's College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. We are super proud of you, Karen. And now for the credits. The project member featured in this episode was Karen. The adult volunteers featured in this episode were Jarrett Murray and Kerry Warren. The PROJcast theme song was created by Justin and his smart partner Eric March and performed by Marinda Anderson, Rebecca, and Nicole. The PROJcast logo was created by Iris Brown. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search the 52nd Street Project and look for 5e and 2e on our logo. The 52nd Street Project is supported by public funds from New York City's Department of Cultural Affairs and the New York State Council on the Arts. The 52nd Street Project is a nonprofit organization, and we're able to do what we do because of generous folks like you. Please go to our website 52project.org/donate to check out how you can support us. Every little bit helps. Remember the project motto: we all belong, we all get along. See you next time.
See you next month.
Wait,
Nothing rhymes with month. On the 52nd Street Project.